Beating bosses has always been a fundamental part of almost every video game out there, and the Littlebigplanet franchise is no exception. With more than 10 games, this massive franchise is bound to have lots, and I mean lots of bosses. And let me tell you that I was shocked to learn that there are 42 bosses in total. So today I'm going to be taking the pain and joy to rank every single one of them from the worst to what I believe to be the best boss of the franchise. So without further ado, let's get into it. The worst boss in Littlebigplanet history is without a doubt the Snowman in Littlebigplanet for PSP. I mean, what is this? Is this a joke? All he does is throw some snowballs and then you kill him in like a matter of seconds. Yeah, I'm not even kidding, you can literally beat him in seconds. I don't know if you can even call him a mini boss at this point. His looks are bland and its mechanics are some of the weakest I've ever seen. Overall, he is the weakest entry on this list. Coming up at spot 41 is Monkey Thief King from Littlebigplanet PSP. Just like the Snowman, this boss is really simple and really easy. It has no stakes and all it requires you to do is grab the genie lamp and wait for it to fall on the ground, while the monkey throws at you fireballs. The biggest problem with this one is that it is executed poorly, as the fireballs do not even touch you, so the boss fight ends quickly and without a challenge at all. The only reason it is ranked higher than the Snowman is only because it lasts a bit longer and the level he is in is one of the best of this game. Up next are food zombies from Littlebigplanet Karting. These are literally obstacles and I don't even know why they are considered bosses. They are pretty basic and most definitely the weakest bosses from Littlebigplanet Karting. Even though karting overall suffers from not so good bosses, except for one, for which I will talk later. But anyways, the reason they are higher than the previous two is only because they are a bit more difficult and I like the overall idea and design. Yet another boss from Littlebigplanet PSP, Alien Monster, is honestly a very disappointing boss. The concept is great and the fact that you throw bombs in his brain to kill it is a very fun idea. But the thing is that he literally acts as a static object in which you should destroy. The design is nothing special too, so it does not have much going for it. The level from the Tinsel Town theme is great, but this boss does not do it justice at all. As all of you might know, Sackboy Big Adventure is one of my favorite games, but despite that, I can agree with some of you that say that it suffers from weak bosses. And when I'm talking about weak bosses, I mean bosses like the Giant Befuddler. This boss is extremely easy, and it most definitely is a boring one. All you do is wait for the ground to appear and then walk in the same time with it. It has no real stakes in my opinion, like most of the bosses in this game, and that alone makes it a drag to play through. The level in itself is a bit bland, and the visuals aren't nearly as great as in the other levels. Overall, a disappointing entry. At number 37 we have Sumo from the first Littlebigplanet. I mean, what can I say, I really dislike this boss, and I really think that compared to the other bosses in this game, it falls flat on its face. It is a pretty basic boss, and honestly is just like a giant enemy version of the little sumos that you find often in the island's theme. All he does is stomp you with his giant legs, and after a while it becomes so annoying. As for the difficulty, if you play it on multiplayer like me, the fight will end quicker than it will begin. So yeah, overall it's a weak boss. Well, look at that, another Snowman boss, and yet again another boss from Sackboy Big Adventure. This one is a very short boss, and it literally lasts only a couple of minutes. The design is great, and the level in itself is beautifully made. It's a chase style type of boss where you have to run away and survive from getting crushed, which as we will get further into the video, you will see that this type of bosses are regular in the franchise. Compared to the later entries, it lacks difficulty, and for that reason it deserves this spot. At number 35 we have Banana Bandit. This boss is a giant version of the small and the most annoying creatures of the game. And I'm talking about the Banana Bandits. These little creatures are always a pain as they constantly jump when you try to hit them. And this boss is not different, as he jumps almost constantly. On the positive, I like that compared to some other bosses, it offers a challenging time, and its design is great. But aside from that, I don't think this one has much going for it. So anyway, let's move on to the next ones. One of the most annoying bosses, and definitely the one that will burn your nerves out, is Terrible Oni. Man, how much I hate this boss. Aside from its terrifying look, this one is so basic but at the same time so hard. Talk about child friendly. It almost feels impossible to pull the lever with how much fire he spits out of his mouth, and how much he crushes you with his giant knife. It is a literal pain, that's all I'll say. At number 33 we have our first entry from the PS Vita game. The Junkyard Dog, in all honesty, is a pretty boring boss fight. The visuals are nothing extraordinary, and something that always bothered me is how you get the Grabinators only to not use them effectively. I mean, they are there just to be there. The gameplay is good and the soundtrack is a classic, and as always, I enjoy the humor of all this in this level. Aside from that, it's a basic boss, not fitting enough for a world such as the Coaster Valley. In my opinion, they could have made something so much better. They could have even used the Cyclops idea, as it would have been a fantastic touch to the world. But, oh well, all we got was a walking dog. One of the better designed bosses, the Raffled Ruffian, is a decent boss fight, with a creative use of the grappling hook, or whatever they call it in this game, and a good gameplay. The only problem I find with this one is yet again the difficulty, and I don't mean that it's hard, but quite the opposite. This fight is very easy, and the fact that his punches rarely land on you make it boring and repetitive. As for the visuals, I think we all love an underwater world, so it is a no-brainer that this boss has amazing visuals. The most disappointing boss ever gotta be Vex. Man, this boss deserves this spot only because of how stupidly easy he is for a final boss. The most annoying thing in this battle is that Vex is one of the best villains in their franchise, if not the best one, and this final fight does not do it justice at all. His attacks are weak and rarely make a scratch on you. The design is not amazing, and the fact that this boss should have been the best of Sackboy Big Adventure is sad. It does not feel like a finale at all, and it lacks stakes and replayability. Level design is also not that special. Waiting and playing 61 levels only for the game to end like this is a true crime. Overall, the most disappointing entry on this list. Coming up at the top 30 is Z-Dude from the Metropolis theme in the first game. With this boss, the developers definitely got creative, as the gameplay in this one is great. The idea to deflect the rocket balls and hit the henchman and Z-Dude with them is honestly well executed. The fight is not that hard though, and as you might have figured out now, that is a downside for this boss, so that's the reason it is ranked in this place and not higher. One of the better bosses in Littlebigplanet PSP, the Ape boss fight is honestly so good for how limited the game was back then. And I don't know if it was just me, but the entirety of this level, and especially the boss fight, feels like a throwback at the King Kong movie. The fight is hard and the visuals are nice. The mechanics are very well made, and overall it's a decent boss fight. The only reason it is ranked here is because compared to some other ones, it's just not that mind-blowing. Number 28 is the fire-breathing dinosaur from Littlebigplanet Karting. This boss fight is honestly pretty cool, and its concept is great. The gameplay is fleshed out and the visuals are top-notch. The music as always delivers. On the negative, I feel like this fight works more like a challenge level than a proper boss fight, because of how it is made with a timer and all that. At number 27 we have another entry from the karting game, and it is none other than the final boss. The trash monster has a phenomenal design in my opinion, and the visuals from this level have a stellar look. This boss, unlike the Vex from Sackboy Big Adventure, is way more challenging and fun, but in my opinion it suffers from a repetitive gameplay. In fact, I think all of karting bosses suffer from this problem, except the Fire Pig, but he is way later in the video. As for this one, I think it's not that bad, but at the same time not that great either. Overall, it's a bittersweet experience. Out of all the mini-bosses of Sackboy Big Adventure, as I like to call them, the Electric Werewolf is definitely the best. Now, what I mean of mini-bosses are the bosses that are just a more powerful version of the already established enemies, such as the Banana Bandit for example. Now, as for the Electric Werewolf, this boss is challenging, fun, visually stunning and definitely an entertaining experience. The difficulty is exactly where it needs to be for a mid-story boss, and the gameplay of this boss fight is super smooth. Overall, a decent entry from the Sackboy spin-off game. The first Vex boss fight in Sackboy Big Adventure is so much better than its final one, and that, while good for this fight, is such a sad fact. I love this fight, and in all respect, this boss feels more intimidating and challenging than the final one. The visuals and the voice acting of Vex is top tier, and the way he interacts with you and trying to confuse you is honestly a great touch to the feel of the battle. One other thing that makes this boss fight interesting is that it pays kind of an homage to the final boss of Littlebigplanet 3, with the way the gameplay works. All in all, an impressive fight nonetheless. One of the most annoying bosses ever gotta be the Hollow Train in Land of Odd. I cannot even explain how hard this boss fight is when you try to ace it. It's a literal pain. I've definitely tried this boss like 1,000 times before I finally passed it. Honestly, for a second world boss, they went too far with this one, and how stupidly difficult it is. Apart from that, I find the mechanics very well made, and the gameplay very entertaining. The only downside are the visuals. I've always felt that this battle lacked great visuals, and for a world as stunning as Odd, this level fails to impress. The Schooldozer from the first game is yet another Tales-style type of boss, and in fact it is the first one, the one that opened the way for so many others. But unlike the ones I mentioned earlier, this one is so much better, even though still not the best out of the Tales genre, because some of them are truly impressive, as you will see later in the video. Now, I don't know if it's just my nostalgia hitting or anything else, but this boss to me feels very classic. It has that vibe and feel that makes you think that it is an instant classic, and even though it's not that complicated or extremely detailed, this boss fight is very enjoyable. The gameplay is smooth and the visuals are definitely nice, even though a bit creepy for a child's game. But again, we are talking about the first game, so yeah, moving on. The second boss fight of Vex is exactly like the first one, but most definitely better. It has a couple of added attacks, and yeah, it's enjoyable. Don't know what more to say about it, honestly. Coming up at spot 21 is the Chicken Mini from Factory of a Better Tomorrow. And well, look at that, it is the first boss from the second game. That truly shows how great of a game Littlebigplanet 2 is. This boss in particular is yet again a chase style type of boss. Unlike the other ones, this one to me always seemed funny and terrifying at the same time. I mean, look at this. It is a little giant robot chicken. Gotta love this boss, only for that sole reason alone. Something else that stands out is how, unlike the junkyard dog from Vita, this one actually uses its given power up correctly and effectively. We are officially in the top 20 best bosses, and let me tell you, from here on the bosses are all amazing. Now for number 20 we have Zapata from the first game. Always thought this boss was cleverly made, and I love how creative they got with this one. The difficulty is okay, and I love how menacing this boss is. But I don't wanna lie, gotta love how when you defeat him he literally explodes in smithereens. Yeah, not even kidding. Sackboy Prehistoric Moves is probably the smallest Littlebigplanet game with only 7 levels in total and just one boss. But believe me when I tell you that one boss is perfect. Literally perfect. It is in fact one of the most impressive ones. The way they incorporated the motion controller and its usability to be able to beat this boss is fantastic. The visuals are great and really sell the prehistoric display. The mechanics are top notch, and what I like about this boss a lot is how challenging and fun it is to play through. The developers really went all out on this one, especially considering how limited they were back at that time. The best boss from Littlebigplanet karting in my opinion is the Fire Pin. It is refreshing how in this boss fight you are the one that chases the boss. I love how in contrast with the other bosses of this game, this one feels more like you are more in the offensive rather than in the defensive, which is a thing a lot of games do. It is challenging, the visuals are perfect, and the soundtrack is amazing. You couldn't simply ask for a better boss for this game. Yeah, Vex again. And again, it is the same thing but better. The visuals are different and the fight is more intense this time. Nothing more. One of the best first bosses ever, Da Vinci's Robo Machine is an absolute blast. I cannot even explain how fun it is, especially when you play it with your friends or relatives. As for the mechanics, I love his electric yo-yos and the way they incorporated the grappling hook into this boss. The visual side is flawless and the overall presence of the boss is great. On the negative side, I always felt it was stupidly easy when you played it with more than one player, and especially 3 or 4 players. But again, it is supposed to be a first boss, so I guess it does the job pretty well. Overall, it's one of the best and most entertaining out there. Well, look at that, a Littlebigplanet PSP boss that is ranked high on this list, and believe me, deservedly so. This boss absolutely flabbergasted me. The fact that they made this boss with the limitations of the game honestly deserves huge respect. I mean, look at this. This is better than the Schooldozer and better than most chase style type of bosses. This boss, unlike some, is super entertaining, and on the visual side is an absolute perfection. This fight is thrilling and enjoyable to the most. The only thing that holds it down is honestly just the PSP, because if a boss like this were to be on a later game, it would have been a top 10 for sure. One of the best Littlebigplanet bosses, solely because of the concept and the way it uses the Vita's touch, is the Accordion Master from La Marionetta. Now I might be a bit biased because the theme of this world is one of my favorites, but I'm telling you, if there is something this boss is not, it's definitely not boring. Man, is this entertaining, and the fact that the piano you play is accurate is an amazing touch. I mean, you can literally play music in here. Super creative and detailed stuff always fascinate me, so for that alone it deserves this spot. No debate left. The first entry from the third game, and at the same time number 13 on the list, is the third Titan. This literally just goes to show how great the bosses are in general in this game. This final boss of the game is a unique experience, and the fact that it is divided into 4 parts for you to get to play as all the characters such as Toggle, Oddsock, Sackboy and Swoop makes you feel like you are truly playing the final level of the game. The soundtrack used, simply called the Hero Theme, is one of the best songs out of the ones used on the third game. Honestly, for how much I talk about music in my videos, I'll probably think on making a video about ranking all games by their music, so let me know if you would like to see that. But anyways, back to the boss. On the negative side, it sometimes feels more like a level than a fully fledged boss. All in all, a fantastic boss nonetheless. Speaking of creative bosses, at number 12 we have the mini blood cells from Littlebigplanet 2. Man, is this boss satisfying. Unlike most of the bosses, this one actually takes place in an unusual place. The brain. Yeah, and let me tell you that the developers sure had a lot of brain to pull such impressive logics and mechanics for this one. Let's start from the way they made the cells gather all into one big pile of enemies, forming a giant big boss. It's super fluid, and the fact that this boss is in a top-down 3D camera is even more impressive. Love the visuals, and the level in itself is stupidly solid. They definitely knew how to deliver a good match for a tiny sackboy. Yeah, he is shrunk in this one, but only for a short period of time, just to save his friend from Negativitron's control. Coming up at almost the golden top 10 is the Capacitor of Evil from the Jackpot City theme in Littlebigplanet PS Vita. Overall, love the design and the challenging time this boss offers. Also love how much precise skills you need to ace this fight. It requires a quick reaction time and a great set of fast movements. It is a very dynamic boss fight with lots to offer. Sadly, there are even better bosses on the list, so he has to stay at this spot. Well, look at that, we are officially at the top 10 best bosses, and at number 10 we have none other than the Timpont Monster from Littlebigplanet 3. Where do I even begin with this one? First of all, the design of this boss is incredible, and the visuals are great. The soundtrack is honestly pretty interesting too, and adds to the thrill of the level. Aside from all of this, the thing that grabbed my attention the most is how did they actually manage to do his movements so fluidly. To date, I still have yet to figure out how they made him with the in-game tools. And probably at this point I might never find out how this boss was made. Nonetheless, this fight, even though a bit easy, is one of the best you will ever need to play through. Everything down to the last details is literally perfect in this level. Speaking of impressive fights, the second Titan from the Ziggurat theme in Littlebigplanet 3 is another jaw-dropping fight. I mean, how did they do this? The way its tentacles move is so impressive. In comparison with the other chase type of bosses, this one is the deadliest and the hardest. And aside from that, I love all the atmosphere and vibes this level has. Yep, overall a great boss fight. This one will probably be controversial for some of you, but at number 8 we have the Oven Boss from Littlebigplanet 2. Coming from Victoria's Laboratory theme, this boss honestly is one of my favorite in terms of visuals. I absolutely love the ambience and the colors used in this one. Plus, the terrifying look of the boss always captivated me. The soundtrack is the best, and don't know about you, but I really appreciate the way the developers use the grabinators in this level. Also really like how this boss has different phases, and how you get up on the elevator to get to the upper floors as he crawls like a giant spider in the windows of the building. Unlike some of the bosses, the Oven Boss feels very actiony and thrilling, and for me, that is one of the must-have qualities for a good boss fight. I might be blinded by nostalgia, but I really love this fight, and everything it offers. Probably the most controversial choice in this video, at number 7, we have the Collector from Littlebigplanet 1. I know, some of you probably expected him to be higher, but believe me, there are some bosses that are even better than him, and more advanced. The thing that carries this boss fight is honestly the killer soundtrack and the difficulty. The visuals are nice too, but they are not the best part about it. Despite that, I think that this is a final boss done right, and honestly for a game of late 2000s, this one is great. Love how the difficulty progresses through all the fight, and really appreciate how this boss was made in a time when the logic in Littlebigplanet 1 was not nearly as advanced as Littlebigplanet 2 or 3. It is a great and a satisfying conclusion to such a beloved game. It definitely is one of the most important things that put Little Big Planet on the map. At number 6 we have the Vexed Mama Pete from Sackboy Big Adventure. One of the few bosses that left an amazing impression on me from this game is definitely this one. Love the visuals, the music, the scope of the boss, the new power up and the vibes of the level. You got to try to know how good this boss is. While playing the game, this boss always stood out as the most fleshed out and the second best boss of the game. Overall, it's an incredible experience and definitely one you would want to try out. The best boss fight from Little Big Planet 3, always in my opinion, is the first Titan. Yeah, the one with Otsop. Don't even know what to say about this one. It's super creative, visually impressive, and it offers a lot of challenge, as it requires great skills. The boss design is top tier, and the mechanics used are the best the game has to offer. I remember playing this level countless times because of how hard it was back at the time, and playing it multiplayer with my relatives honestly was an amazing experience, one I might not forget anytime soon. Aside from that, the level has a lot of replayability, and it's pretty fun. I feel like it's no surprise that the best boss from the Vita game and probably one of the best bosses of all time is the final boss. The Puppeteer is one of the best bosses and don't know about you, but man was this one hard back when I first played it. I'm telling you that it is one of the most challenging bosses to ever come out of these games. Love the twist that you first battle the hollows and then just when you think it's over, the level presents you the real boss, which is the Puppeteer. I always have been a fan of the Vita story mode and this level concludes the story on a high note. The dramatic music, the challenging gameplay and everything else make this one an unforgettable finale, truly an underrated masterpiece. Coming up at number 3 is the Spacecraft Lobster from the second Little Big Planet. Ironically enough, even though I was never a fan of Avalonia's team in Little Big Planet 2, its boss impressed me so much. I can really say that it's one of the most enjoyable bosses. It feels like you are in a movie and it's very cinematic. Love how in this level you are in the offensive and in the defensive at the same time. It really elevates the experience. The visuals are top notch and the gameplay is so smooth. The design of the boss is also amazing. In terms of difficulty, all I can say is that it's challenging enough to make you don't want to explode. It's a titanic fight in my opinion and definitely Little Big Planet at almost its best. This might be the biggest surprise of the video, but coming up at almost the first place is the Vexed Naomi from Sackboy Big Adventure. This due to the amazing gameplay and also because of the challenge it offers. Seeing a 3D boss done right and being so hard made my inner self real happy. I mean, Sackboy Big Adventure is full of 3D bosses, which is something revolutionary considering that Little Big Planet is a 2.5D game, but none comes close to perfection as much as this boss does. Besides that, it really elevates the story and the overall game experience. The design is incredible, soundtrack is always perfect. What more could you ask for? This fight is literally, and I'm telling you, literally perfect. Speaking of perfect, the best boss from the Little Big Planet franchise is none other than the Negativity. This fight is Little Big Planet at its peak, and honestly I couldn't think of a boss fight in the franchise that is better than this one. It is the perfect finale to the best game of the franchise. Even the cutscenes here are so cinematic that they actually impress me. From the hard gameplay to the visuals and the music, this fight will absolutely be imprinted in your mind. The way the boss fight is divided into a lot of phases and the way it uses everything the game taught you into one big giant level is honestly pretty captivating. It really is the best boss fight. And don't even get me started on how happy I was when I finally beated the level. This fight has everything you would ever need from a game such as Little Big Planet. Creativity, action, platforming, multiplayer fun, and everything else. And with that, we have come to the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed it and let me know who is your favorite boss. More videos coming, so don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Bye and see you in the next one.